The grey dawn broke over the fields of Agincourt, casting long shadows across the churned mud that stretched to the horizon. The air was heavy with moisture, the kind that clings to armor and seeps into bones. Across the field, barely visible through the lingering mist, the banners of the French army loomed, and with them, the promise of death. Thousands of soldiers stood poised to crush whatever resistance they might face. But here, on the English side, there was no grand army to speak of. Here were weary men, worn from bitter campaigning, their faces lined with exhaustion and fear. Some leaned on their spears, others crouched beside their comrades, whispering prayers for deliverance. The odds were impossible, absurd even. Some of the youngest soldiers fidgeted, stealing glances at the older veterans, whose silence spoke volumes. And then came the sound of footsteps. From the center of the camp, King Henry strode forward. His armor was simple, no gleaming crown sat atop his head. But there was an air about him, a fire, a resolve, that seemed to draw every eye, even before he spoke. He moved among his men, his gaze steady, his shoulders squared beneath the weight of the lives that would soon charge into that killing field. They had followed him for months, for years, but there was no denying it. Today would test them all in ways no one could predict. A murmur swept through the ranks as the king climbed atop a small ridge to address them. For a moment, he simply looked out over his army. These were not polished knights or professional warriors. Many of them were farmers, tradesmen, and craftsmen who had left their homes months ago under a banner of hope and conquest. Now, that hope hung by a fraying thread. Henry seemed to sense it, the heavy cloud of dread threatening to suffocate them all. He raised a hand, calling for quiet, and then his voice, calm yet unmistakably determined, broke the heavy stillness. "If we are marked to die today, my friends," he began, his words rolling like distant thunder, "we are enough to do our kingdom loss, and if we live, well then, the fewer of us, the greater share of honor." The men began to shift on their feet, as if the weight of their fear had lessened slightly. Henry's voice climbed above the murmurs. "Think of it, brothers. This day, this ground, this hour, it will echo through time. Long after we are gone, men shall speak of us, of what we did here, of who we were." His eyes swept the crowd, finding individual faces among the sea of soldiers. It wasn't just a king who spoke now, it was a comrade, a friend. And those who are safe in their beds this day, those who are not with us on this field, they shall think themselves accursed, for they were not here with us on St. Crispin's Day. A murmur of agreement rippled through the ranks, faint at first, then louder, as Henry pressed on. We happy few, we band of brothers," he declared, his words ringing out with conviction. "For the man who sheds his blood with me today, be he low-born or noble, shall be my brother. No titles, no divides, only the kinship of courage and sacrifice." The men were standing straighter now, their breath visible in the chill air, their faces lifted to their king. The tight knot of fear that had gripped them began to loosen, replaced by something warmer, richer, pride. "And gentlemen now abed in England," Henry continued, his voice thick with emotion, "shall think themselves poor they stood not here with us, that they could not stand shoulder to shoulder with you, my brothers. For this day shall be remembered, and your names shall endure, as long as men speak stories, as long as men dream of triumph against all odds." He cast his arm out towards the French forces, their banners flickering faintly in the broken light. "Let them come," he cried. "For though they outnumber us, though the earth itself trembles beneath their cavalry, they cannot take from us the moment we claim here today." The men erupted into cheers, raw and unrestrained, their nervous whispers transformed into shouts of defiance. Henry's chest swelled as he took in the sound of his army standing up straight, their hearts thundering in unison. "It matters not how many they are," he shouted, his voice overtaking theirs like a battle cry. "What matters is who we are and what we shall leave behind, a legacy of courage, of brotherhood, of honor." When he stepped down from the ridge, there was no hesitation among them. The fear was still there, yes, but it pulsed alongside something mightier, resolve. They would face that field of death, and no matter its outcome, they would stand as one. As the sun began to break through the mist, gleaming faintly on the ranks of soldiers preparing for battle, Henry clasped the shoulder of a nearby soldier. The young man's hands were trembling, but his grip tightened on the spear he carried. "Today," Henry said quietly, his voice fierce and proud, "we write history." And with that, the English army advanced, hearts burning with the words of their king, immortal words that would be carried for centuries, words forged on the fiery precipice of St. Crispin's Day.